Good afternoon, or what is a warm, bright and sunny day. It is Wednesday the 22nd of March and I've got a nice hot cup of tea and a parcel to continue unboxing, which is this. And what I'm going to pull it out of here is this sheaf of issues of early White Dwarfs. So I've looked at 13, 14, and you'd think the next one I do will be 15, but no, it is 16, which came out in January 1979-1980. It costs 60 pence, and it promises to contain Parts of the Lil, a Game Award scenario, Chronicle Monsters, Thomas Covenant in D&D, and more. We're then going into sort of like a classic cover of a barbarian facing off against a demon, very Conan-esque kind of warrior. So great thing about this is essentially this will be about the period where I'm beginning to learn a little bit about gaming, but not quite knowing what it was, because I had my well, let's be clear about it, what would be my mother's boyfriends telling me about gaming, but not in getting me involved, which I kind of would have been interesting, but I was 12 then, so I don't think they would have wanted a 12-year-old joining in on their game. Nevertheless, I would later on, start picking up copies of White Dwarf, go and pick up the games that they were talking about, mostly Dungeons and Dragons and other games, and that's where I got started. So this was a bit before my time in terms of my actual involvement in gaming. I was only just beginning to learn about it. So the great thing about issues of magazines like this is that you've got all the advertising in there as well as the articles, and the advertising always kind of captures the feel of what the flavour of the gaming scene was like at the time. So we have Peace on Earth, Goodwill Throughout the Galaxy, Model Workshop. There's a series of adverts for a shop in Guildford in Surrey, followed by, we've got an advert from Avalon Hill for its board games, including some absolute classics, Magic Realm, Dune, recently republished by Gale Force 9 in the wake of, it's basically when the new film was released, Wizard's Quest and Starship Troopers, and they're still great board games. We turn over the place, we have a page, and we have yet more games, an advert for Fantasy Games Unlimited, for Colony Delta and Millsea. Board games from Fantasy Games Unlimited, but also Gangster, which would have been, I'm thinking, probably the first role-playing game to deal with gangsters and prohibition and the sort. Citadel Miniatures. Citadel Miniatures had the license for Star Trek miniatures back in the day. And this would have been at the time when Star Trek The Motion Picture was released, and it was to be supported. As you see, there's an upcoming issue of White Dwarf, issue 17, which would focus on Star Trek. Galactic Aliens is, we've got an advert for sort of like that's an artist, and then games from Eon Products, available from Games Workshop, of course, Darkover and Cosmic Encounter, the Dungeon Hobby Shop, which was, let's have a look, where was that? That was in Lake Geneva. So you've got an advert for the Dungeon Shop in an early issue of White Dwarf. Then we get on to the features. Of course, Ian Livingstone was the editor at the Pot at this time. Essentially, it's highlighting, that there's a new questionnaire coming up. How magazine was voted best games magazine in the recent Games Day Awards, and so on. And then we've got a list of all the features in the departments, of course. So we start off Chronicle Monsters. This is Lewis Pulsifer's article on gaming in Thomas Covenant's, in Stephen Donaldson's The Chronicles of Thomas Covenant Unbeliever, which were one of the big pieces of fiction, fantasy fiction at the time. not always held in a high regard, but also held in a high regard. It's kind of really an odd book. It's sort of something. It's got flaws in it. The character itself is particularly unpleasant. But here we have stats and so on for different monsters and so on that you might encounter in that world if you were playing it as part of your Dungeons and Dragons campaign. So cave wights, sea leech giants, and so on. No stats for Thomas Covenant himself, but that's no problem. You're not really meant to be playing him anyway, because ultimately, let's not beat around the bush. Thomas Covenant was an unpleasant, miserable git. Expanding universe. This is part 4, so I've missed part 3 with not having a look at issue 15 of White Dwarf. But here we've got new rules. This is by Andy Slack. We've got rules for expanded social status, psionic special talents, as for example telepathy and special talents, and so on. And that comes to a fairly short close. Actually, it's only an hour and a page and a half long. This might be the final part. Before we've got a section of the news, with a crystal ball there. So. Hopefully by the time this White Dwarf is published, the long-awaited Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide will be available. At Judges Guild is putting out Operation Ogre. RuneQuest as Cults of Practice is also available, along with being back in print. We have Encounters for Boot Hill. Basically one of the earliest role-playing games that basically quickly followed along after Dungeons & Dragons from TSR, along with Empire of the Petal Throne. But of course, literally taking the whole idea of, here's the explanation of role-playing games. You remember that time when you played Cowboys and Indians? Here's a role-playing game where you play Cowboys and Indians. And it would go through sort of like three editions. Sort of like thought of. It's something I think the Sporting show is better than, in some ways, than the game itself. Open Box, which is the reviews section. So here we've got a review of Boot Hill itself, Imperium, the board game from Game Designers Workshop, and Snapshot, another board game from Game Designers Workshop. So essentially we've got Starship Encounter board games at different scales. Imperium, really kind of grand strategic scale. Snapshot is really man-to-man combat aboard starships. Then we have Dungeon Master's Guide. There we go. Actual review by Don Turnbull. He doesn't even rate it as actually not applicable. Probably it's quite a short review. Then Paths of the Law. Strange encounter in a hedge maze with basically almost fairy-like mutant creatures, and this is quite a short piece, but it would make, I believe, the scenarios Best of White Dwarf Scenarios Volume 1 collection. And it's the sort of thing that's easy to plop down into your, just pop down in your Gamma World campaign. Fiend Factory has got monsters. Let me see. Most notably, this is curated by Don Turnbull, of course, who would then collect a lot of these monsters and they would go forward into the Fiend Folio. I don't notice anything here necessarily that did. There's nothing that sort of like particularly interesting out of that collection. Nothing stands out. We have photos from Games Day 5. So here, including a list of all the awards there, won by various things. So best game any type. First was Dungeons and Dragons. Second was Diplomacy. Now, not entirely surprising. Diplomacy was such a big popular game during this period because everyone was playing. Most people were playing it by post. And then third, followed by Squad Leader. Best SF fantasy game was Dungeons and Dragons. Kingmaker, best best board game, best role-playing game, Dungeons and Dragons, followed by Traveller, followed by Chivalry and Sorcery, best magazine, White Dwarf, so on. Yeah, lots of board games in that list. Lots of board games. Treasure chest consists of potions, and then we've also got Molten Magic with an advert for their range of figures. Not very well produced. The produced production is a bit sharper this time, but yeah, not particularly good. We've got here, so from the potions section, Potion of Wall Delusion, Potion of Entropy, so on, written by Mark Gascoigne, notable figure in the history of White Dwarf and Games Workshop. Letters page. A bit more expansive. There's actually several here from various different contributors, and these names would sort of like figure throughout the history of White Dwarf, I suppose, and Phil Masters, of course. And then we have a list of possible games clubs, and then the White Dwarf questionnaire, because it's quite often to have what do you want in this magazine? How do you think we're doing? That sort of thing. Help, classified section, Plymouth Model, advert from Plymouth Model Centre, plain and simple, Games Unlimited upon Kingston on Thames. That's been really simplified over previous adverts, and we've got smaller adverts for Stevian Games and then Games of Liverpool. And as I say, looking for all those adverts is just studying to see what things were available then and how much they were, and reminding yourself that they were actually more expensive than you think they were. And then we have Starweb, advert for a play-by-mail game run through by Chris Carvey Games and the Flying Buffalo. Rided is Leicester's Games Shop, Forever People in Bristol, Greenwall and Ball in Cleveland, and then Dungeons and Starships in Birmingham. And turning over the page, penultimately we have the Nottingham Model Soldier Shop, and then an advert for Sorcerer's Cave, which, as I say, is a terrific Dungeon Bash board game, which you need essentially a gym or a community hall or a school hall to play, because all the pieces, all the tiles are really quite large as you map out the dungeon, and then you've got to start doing it again over the different levels. New games in Games Workshop, which includes Yukito Publications, board games like Panzer, Ironclad, Starfall, and so on, Time War Task Force games, Fantasy Games Unlimited, Traveller, of course, and then advert there for Junta, the classic board game of the Banana Republic, absolutely brilliant, and still got the advertising for TSR on the back for Gamma World, selling it with sex, and I'm still going, yes, sex sells, but it's not really very Gamma World, is it? Certainly didn't see that see that young lady dressed like that or those young ladies dressed like that in any of the scenarios. But anyway, that's White Dwarf issue number 16. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed this unboxing in the Nook. If you have, please do click on the like button down below, and of course if you've got any comments or feedback, I do appreciate you taking the time to post those. And then lastly, if you want to be alerted to get more unboxings in the Nook, where you'll see me out here with a package containing either a book or game, or in this case a magazine, which I'll unbox and chat about to the best extent of my knowledge for roughly 10 minutes or so, all of course accompanied by a nice hot cup of tea. Then please do hit the subscribe button down below. Thanks again for watching another unboxing of the Nook. We'll be back again soon with another one. Bye for now.